Today on the Bourbon Bytes podcast, Jim Beam partners with Cadillac's F1 team. Canada drops retaliatory tariffs on bourbon. Daft Punk joins the Fortnite universe. And I review the newly appointed World's Best Bourbon, Frank August Small Batch. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and this is the week of September 25th, 2025. It is officially fall season, and that means it is the perfect time to enjoy your favorite bourbon or whiskey. Not to say that you can't enjoy it in the spring or summer. Some may prefer a pumpkin spice latte to celebrate the fall, but for me, I want a nice, spicy bourbon to celebrate the season. I'm actually going to be reviewing one of those. It actually won Best Whiskey of the Year, according to a very, very popular publication. We'll get to that in just a bit. We do have some news to cover before then, but yeah, I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're in the fall season. Now, I do live in Southern California, so fall is basically low 70s, high 60s at the most. But you know what? I'm here for it, and I'm here to tell you about all the new things in the world of whiskey and video game news for this week. All right, well, like I said, there's been a new whiskey named the World's Best Bourbon. We're going to get to that at the end when we do our bite-sized review because I actually have a bottle. But we do have some other news in the world of whiskey. One big story comes to us from Jim Beam. They're actually partnering with Cadillac's F1 team for the first time ever. So Cadillac's actually debuting their team in 2026 to Formula One, but they've signed a multi-year deal with Jim Beam to make them the official spirits partner of this team. They're actually the 11th team to join Formula One. I'm not the biggest race fan, but I do know that the F1 video games have been a hit across consoles. I know that the 2025 edition came out back in May. So I would love to see this partnership shown in a video game sometime soon, maybe the 2026 edition. Cadillacs have basically had a huge role in the history of Jim Beam. Apparently, according to their spokesperson, Jim Beam himself used to carry his yeast strain every day after work with him in his Cadillac. Yeah, it was a 1939 Cadillac, and he would keep the yeast strain in a mason jar and bring it with him every day. I guess it's probably to make sure that they, had that yeast strain in case something happened to the distillery, or I don't know if people were stealing yeast strains back then, but it is a cool story. The fact that Jim Beam has kind of carried this legacy. Their current master distiller also drives a Cadillac. So it's been a thing in the Jim Beam family for years, but very cool collaboration. Honestly, I'm here for it. I love to see the word of bourbon get out at these various events, whether it's sports, cars, all the fun things. The more people that know about bourbon, the more this industry can succeed. So shout out to Jim Beam and Cadillac. Now, we do have some good international news coming to us from Canada in terms of tariffs on Kentucky bourbon. I reported probably a few months back on how that's becoming so restrictive in the world of whiskey in other countries outside of the U.S., just the current state of the economy and the government and all the stuff I don't really want to get into. But we do have a new update. Canada is dropping the retaliatory tariffs on Kentucky bourbon, which is a win, I think, for everyone, honestly. If you remember a few months ago, Canada pulled a lot of bottles of bourbon from the shelf. They replaced a lot of American products with their own products to kind of do a bit of a boycott of American goods. And, I think that's a perfectly acceptable way to protest the tariffs coming to your country. But I'm glad to see that bourbon is going to be back on the shelves, at least in a lot of Canadian retailers. But to see these retaliatory tariffs kind of being rolled back a bit is a win for Kentucky bourbon. I hope that more people in Canada and other places across the world get to experience it now. I love Kentucky bourbon, and I think you should enjoy it too. Interestingly enough, I noticed that a lot of the listeners to the podcast are international, which is very, very cool. Glad you guys are listening in and you're interested in hearing about bourbon news from a U.S. perspective. Hopefully you can get your hands on more bourbon now. We'll see. But yeah, I'm always a big fan of bourbon brings people together, it brings communities together, and it's worth sharing. So well done to those that made that happen. I'm not going to credit any particular politician or party or anything that made that happen, but I am glad to see that bourbon is going to be hopefully back on the shelves in some of our Canadian retailers. I know some of you guys will be very, very happy to see that. Now, we do have a couple pieces of video game news, some negative, some positive. I'll start with the negative, just so we get in on a high note. The team behind Civilization 7, which is, I think they're called Firaxis, Firaxis, but they are under the 2K umbrella. They announced some layoffs, unfortunately, this past couple weeks. And it's really sad to see because I just downloaded Civilization 7 a couple weeks back, and I've really been enjoying it. It is quite a different gameplay than Civilization 6 and 5 and, some of the games in the past. But me as a casual gamer, I actually do love some of these new mechanics. So I'm really sad to see that they did some layoffs after the release of this game. Now, they're also behind the game XCOM, which I've talked about on the podcast before. But yeah, I know that there were some mixed reviews about that game. Some articles are connecting it to the release of Hollow Knight Silk Song. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. It just happened to be around the time that game was released, so people are saying, like, that game did so well, and, on a much more limited staff, maybe they're trying to kind of cut back and see if they can do something similar. But I just do want to show my support for those people that were laid off. If you are in the industry, check out these folks. I'm sure they are incredibly talented people. If you have a position open, please reach out to them. Or if you know them from a previous role, just show your support. I mean, I listen, I work in an industry that has layoffs all the time, unfortunately. And it's a really tough time when big companies do things like this. And the best thing you can do is just support those folks that you've worked with in the past or people you're connected with, and just put in referrals or do anything you can to help support their career journey moving forward. So I feel for those folks. I will continue to play Civilization 7. I think the game is incredible. I think it is a bit of a deviation from some Civilization mechanics that some people are used to, but again, I'm a fan of them, and I just hope that these developers go on to find new and better opportunities in the world of video games. All right, lastly, are there any Fortnite fans out there? Probably not, but maybe your kids are. Listen, I know a lot of you listening to this podcast are parents. Well, maybe you might be a little more excited about Fortnite because Daft Punk, the band, is coming to the Fortnite universe. They're actually going to bring 31 songs from their discography over to the game, which includes some immersive club-inspired rooms, costumes featuring the band's iconic helmets, and more. So they're saying that this is being billed as the game's biggest musical experience. They're going to allow players to remix and create mashups of songs, create Lego music videos featuring the band, and make their avatars dance at the Daft Club, which features a supercut of footage from the band's live tour and a live 2007 live album. There is a new bundle that's going to be available in the Fortnite shop that will also include Daft Punk's iconic TB3 and GMO8 helmets, outfits, and accessories, plus instrument and a Get Lucky jam track. So this isn't new to the world of Fortnite. They've actually had a lot of artists come in and do Fortnite concerts, which I know if you're not a Fortnite person, listen, I'm not really either. I've seen some people play it. I am way too bad at it to start streaming it, but I get that there is a huge hype around Fortnite. But some artists including The Weeknd, Travis Scott, Ariana Grande, Eminem, Sabrina Carpenter, and many, many others have done Fortnite concerts. So they know that there is some hype there. They know that there is an audience there. And this seems like one of the biggest collaborations I've ever seen. I love that you can get some outfits inspired by the band. 31 songs are being brought to the game. That's a huge amount. These artists that have done concerts, it's always been very limited. You get access to a few songs, but wow, that's pretty incredible. So I don't know any more details beyond that. It is just announced. It is going to go live on September 27th, which is this Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you are into that, please let me know how it goes. Please share some screenshots or some video recordings on our Discord server. I would love to see how that goes. By the way, if you are not yet on our Discord server, I want to welcome you to an amazing whiskey community. We are relatively small, but we have a great selection of channels to post in, whether you're sharing your latest pickups from bottles that you've grabbed from your local liquor store, or you're sharing your latest restaurant order at your favorite local pub. Just a really great place to share what you're up to lately and meet new friends. So if you're not yet on our Discord server, please join us. You can go to bourbonbytes.com, which is my home for everything on the internet. There's a link to join the Discord there, but also links to all of my content across the web, including this podcast. You can get access to the YouTube channel, to all the videos that I've uploaded, all the live streams I do each week. And if you want to support the channel, you can do it right there at bourbonbytes.com by becoming a Byte Club member. For as little as $2 a month, you can support the channel, get access to some exclusive posts, some polls, and of course, the higher tiers get you access to things like our movie night, our after party hangout, and our exclusive Byte Club tasting. So if you're curious, just check it out, bourbonbytes.com. If you have any questions, shoot me a message over on Instagram, or you can always email me, contact@bourbonbytes.com. I check that email every day as well as my Instagram messages. So definitely reach out if you have questions. I would love to have you as part of the Discord community and potentially a Byte Club member if you want to support the channel. So thank you all so much for checking that out. And I think it is about time for us to move on to our biggest news story of the day, as well as our bite-sized review. All right. Well, while researching topics to cover on this week's podcast, I came across this new announcement from the IWSC, which is the International Whiskey and Spirits Competition, that they've just announced their world's best bourbon for 2025. Now, I know a lot of us have mixed feelings on these type of announcements. I mean, I know my biggest gripe with it was when Henry McKenna Tenure won a similar award and went all the way up to $60, $70 when I could get that for $26. So I feel you there. But since this announcement was just made, I made sure to run to my local liquor store and grab a bottle of the winner and see if it's worth the price now, and hope to God that it's not going to go up in price because of this win. Now, if you read the title of this podcast, of course, we are talking about Frank August Small Batch Kentucky Straight Bourbon, and it won a 98 points and the Bourbon Trophy, beating out higher priced bottles from top distilleries. I'll be honest, I've not had Frank August bourbon or rye before. I didn't know enough about it, and it just wasn't enough to get me to pick it up. But now that I see that it's been announced as the bourbon of the year, I had to go grab a bottle. So this one right here was about $70 at my local Bevmo. Like I said, this is the small batch bourbon whiskey from Frank August. It comes in at 100 proof. It is distilled and aged in Kentucky, bottled by Frank August in Bardstown, Kentucky. Now, one of the reasons that I think I've kind of avoided this bottle for a while is they're not very clear on what's inside the bottle. And even though it is a gorgeous bottle, I mean, one of the best decanters I've seen on the market, especially at that price point, I really want to know what's inside this straight bourbon whiskey. Now, according to this press release from the International Wine and Spirits Competition, they are a non-distilling producer, and they source and blend whiskeys from Kentucky distilleries. It's blended in small batches of 10 to 15 barrels, sourced from an undisclosed distillery or distilleries. So we don't know the mash bill. We don't know the age. It's pretty available here in Southern California. I don't know how it is where you guys are, but I was able to find this bottle relatively easily right after this announcement, which was pretty rare because I remember when the Henry McKenna announcement came out, it was so hard to find. Now, as you guys know, when I don't see any age information or where this has been distilled, it does kind of give me a bit of a hesitancy when I'm reviewing a new whiskey. I love transparency, and I think a lot of us that do review whiskeys love to see that. And I get that there are some contracts in place where we can't necessarily know where everything's from, but I think hiding things like age statement and mash bill and just other things like that, I don't know, it kind of starts me off on the wrong foot, I'll say. So I'll try to avoid that connotation that I've had in the past, because I know that this whiskey is very highly regarded. So I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to approach this from a blank mindset, but know that when I do my review, I'm going to be including that into a factor of what score I give this whiskey, because I think it's, like I said, we all seek transparency. We all seek as much honesty as we can in the industry. So I just want to put that disclaimer up front. Yes, I'm a little turned off from this just based on the lack of transparency, but that doesn't mean it can't be an incredible bourbon for the price. So let's go ahead and uncork this Frank August small batch bourbon whiskey. By the way, I do have to give them a shout out. This cork is incredible. It's a super solid metal piece on the top. It's got like a bit of a gold finish, and it's just really hefty. Like I said, the decanter is beautiful. I mean, I can see myself reusing this for another whiskey in the future, because it's just really nice looking. I give them that. Like, even without trying the whiskey, it's just really pretty to look at. So, all right, I just poured my glass of it. Like I said, this is 100 proof. Let's go ahead and give this Frank August a nose. All right, well, right off the bat, I can tell that this is a very nicely aged bourbon. They don't give us an age statement, but there's so much oak backbone there that I think that we're not dealing with I don't want to say barely legal, but we're not dealing with like a 3-year-old bourbon, right? With it being a straight bourbon whiskey, it has to be at least 4 years old. Based on the nose, I would guess maybe a bit older than that. Not to say that the youngest bourbon in here isn't, 4 years old, but there's some older whiskey in here for sure based on that nose. There's quite a bit of baking spice there as well. I mean, speaking of fall whiskeys, like I said at the top of the podcast, this one noses like an incredible fall whiskey. Honestly, it's everything I want in a bourbon nose, especially like a non-finished bourbon. I mean, it's caramel, vanilla, the traditional bourbon notes, but like I said, those baking spices, a little bit of nutmeg. This one does have quite a bit of cinnamon influence, kind of tingles the tip of the nose a bit. That's really, really nice on the nose. I'm not going to lie. That's pretty damn impressive. All right, well, now that I've nosed this, let's go ahead and give this a taste. Cheers. Okay, different. Yeah, wow. It almost has some flavor notes that I would associate with more with like a Scotch whiskey, honestly. There's some honey cereal grain notes there that I think are pretty surprising on something like this. I think it's, such a dark nose that when you go to the palate and it being a bit brighter and lighter, it does surprise me a bit. Yeah, there's surprisingly like an orchard fruit note there. I mean, to me, it's immediately reading like peach. It kind of reminds me of like a very, very ripe peach with that sweetness. But those baking spices are there as well. But I don't want to go quite as far as saying like peach cobbler because that's one of my favorite desserts ever. It's like a ripe, fresh off a tree peach versus a, stewed down peach. So really, really good. I like that. Very different. Very not what I was expecting at all. If I had to guess a distillery, I would be so lost in guessing where this is from. When it comes to finish, I think this has a medium to long finish. Honestly, for 100 proof, it is sticking around. Those spices are kind of tingling the tongue long after I finish a sip. And again, it feels like in the fall territory. It feels like a nice, warm, seasonal bourbon. Now, like I said, this is a small batch. This particular one is 10 to 15 barrels. There's no information on here in terms of which batch it is, which is a little disappointing, especially something like this. This won such a prestigious honor according to the IWSC. So it's a little disappointing to know if this is the batch that that won the award or not. But I will say, if it was, I can see why this was very, very well received. It's just a really good bourbon. Now, when it comes to value, that's where things get a little tricky, right? So like I said, retail on this is $70. I'll start with the fact that the decanter is beautiful. Honestly, one of the most beautiful decanters I've seen in probably years. I'll be honest, probably years when it comes to like a standard shelfer bourbon. It really looks nice. It looks reusable. It looks, just high quality. The cork itself has some heft to it. So I got to give them credit for that. It is a beautiful decanter, a beautiful cork. What I don't love about this is there's no information about the whiskey. And again, like I said, I get contracts, right? You can't tell us where it's sourced from. And that's fair, right? It's a disappointing fact, but it's fair. What I don't support is not giving us an age statement. Like, I know that likely means, and I don't want to say it, but it likely means you have some really young bourbon in here. It doesn't mean it's all young bourbon, but it means there's probably some younger bourbon in here, which is acceptable. But how about this? How about tell us, like, okay, yes, minimum age statement is 4 years old, but there is a 12-year-old high rye bourbon in here. There is a 15-year-old wheat bourbon. I mean, I'm just making stuff off the top of my head. But like, those are things you can disclose without revealing, one, the distillery, two, the mash bill. Those are things that I can't imagine they're limiting you on disclosing. It almost feels like it's a self-fulfilling thing to not reveal that information. To be called a small batch Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, yes, you are fulfilling all the requirements. 100 proof, I can't condemn you with that. That's a great proof. I appreciate it. But bourbon lovers like myself appreciate information. And when you're not giving us anything, I mean, I'll be honest, the label literally just says Frank August on the front, small batch Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey on the back, the proof, and that's about it. So I would love more transparency. I do know they have some special releases, at least in my area. There's a few different limited edition single barrel bourbons, some special release ryes. I've not quite explored those yet. I wanted to start with this one. One, because it was the one that won Bourbon of the Year. But two, I wanted to set my expectations with this one, because this is a pricey bottle, $70 for this one. I know the single barrel bourbon goes closer to 90 to 100, and then those special release ryes are in like the 120, 130 territory. So I mean, based on this experience, I would definitely consider giving them a try, but I'm going to have to give a rating to this one based on this experience alone. So like I said earlier, I'm judging this based on the retail now. With these awards, you never know what's going to happen. But for this being a $70 bottle, not super transparent on what's going into it, but a gorgeous decanter and a really nice bourbon, I'm going to have to give it a 7.5 out of 10, which is pretty fair. I mean, I think for a bourbon that we don't know much about at the $70 price point, for me to give it that high of a score means that there is something special about this release. And I think there is. It's just a fantastic bourbon. The more I sip on it, the more I enjoy it. I just wish we could have a little bit more information about it. I don't know if I would grab a second bottle of this particular small batch, but I'm very curious to try some of the single barrel releases and even their rye, because their rye gets high ratings too. Didn't win Whiskey of the Year, but it is very, very well regarded in at least some of the reviews I've been seeing about it. So I'm going to have to give that one a try. This one, though, I think it's solid. I think it's a good bourbon. I really enjoyed this pour. I'll be enjoying this bottle. So yeah, 7.5 out of 10 for this one. It would maybe do a little bit better if I knew a little bit more about the, age or things like that. But in the world of bourbon and whiskey, $70 for a non-age dated product is a bit out of the ordinary. And a bit of a gamble. But I think I played the cards well. I'll stick with the gambling analogy here. I'm going to Vegas in a couple weeks, so my mind's already on that. So, I enjoyed the pour. Looking forward to trying more. Do I think this is my best bourbon of 2025? We'll have to see. If you know, I do a top 10 ranking at the end of the year on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Bourbon Bytes, where I rank my top picks for bourbon as well as other whiskeys of the year. So check that out. I do it every year right around New Year's Eve time. It's always a fun stream to do. So make sure to subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified every time I go live. And if you enjoy the podcast, make sure to follow me on whatever platform you are listening on. Quick reminder before I go, you guys can call in and leave a comment or a message for the channel. It's been a minute since we've had a call, but I'm always sitting here anxiously awaiting your call. You can reach me at 916-64-BYTES, that's Bytes with a Y, or 916-642-9837. Leave a voicemail. Let me know what you want to talk about or you want me to talk about on the next episode. Or just leave your feedback. Of course, you can always leave your feedback on, like I said, your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Your rating does mean a lot. I've noticed that there's some ratings coming in, and I just want to say thank you all so much. If you leave a review, I'm happy to mention it on the podcast. I know a few people have just been rating it, which is, amazing. Keep doing that. But if you want your review read on the podcast, just let me know. All right. Thank you again for another amazing week of bourbon and whiskey news. Thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Bourbon Bytes podcast, a whiskey podcast with a gaming twist. Cheers, and I'll talk to you guys next week.